Letters from a Friend at the End of the World. Chapter 4. Through the Woods. Wind howled in Trixie's ears as she stumbled along the snowy path. Her fur coat did little protect her from the biting chill, and certainly did not guard her hoofs from the icy snow. Polaris and his wife Astrid blazed a trail through the mounds of snow just a few steps ahead of her. "How much farther until we reach Frostvale?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. Polaris paused. He looked over his shoulder at her and said, "At least half a day yet, miss. Likely it'll take longer if this accursed storm doesn't let up." He glanced over to Astrid. She smiled weakly at him. He sighed. "We might need to set down for the night if we don't at least make it to the frozen chasm by nightfall. I don't want to see neither of you getting hurt. We can't be pushing ourselves too hard, miss." Trixie cursed under her breath. "It's already been 2 days since we left the caravan. Why is it taking so long to get there? I thought from where we were it was only supposed to take a day." "Supposed to being the key part of that phrase, miss. I told you not to count on it. The winds are really slowing us down. If it weren't for that, we might be making good time."
"Isn't there a faster way, another path we can take that'll get us there quicker?"
He shook his head. "This is the only safe way to get there. I know it doesn't seem like it, but this is actually the easy way. Don't worry, miss," he said comfortingly. "We'll get there in due time. It just may take a little longer than you were hoping."
Trixie hung her head. "I'm not sure I can stand another night in this cold. I wish there were a faster way." Dear, Astrid said softly to Polaris, "what if we cut through the forest? That might save us some time and shield us from the wind, too."
"We don't know what lives there, Astrid," he replied. "It could be too dangerous. What if we were attacked by timber wolves? We don't have the whole caravan at our side now. I can't protect you both."
"I can fight for myself. I don't need to be protected by anyone."
"Even still, miss, the forest can be a dangerous place, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to either of you."
Astrid placed a hoof on his shoulder. "Look at her, dear. She's freezing to death out here. At least in the forest she'd have the trees to hold back the wind. We don't even know if there is anything in there." She stared at him pleadingly. "We have to try, if only for her sake."
"I don't like it," he sighed. "But you may be right." He looked at Trixie. Shivering, she stood waiting for him to say something, her face pink with cold, but adorned with a look of determined resolution. He shook his head. "I may end up regretting this, but let's cut through the forest. If all goes right, we'll save nearly a quarter of a day's hike, and we'll keep the wind off our flanks to boot."
Trixie clapped her hoofs together. "Excellent! We should be able to make it to Frostvale today after all. That might put us back on schedule."
"Don't get your hopes up too much, miss," he cautioned with a wink. "We haven't made it out of the woods yet."
Astrid rolled her eyes. "Well, come on then. We've still got this wind to contend with."
I might be able to do something about that," Trixie offered. Soft blue light surrounded her horn as she concentrated on creating a magical barrier. It flowed in waves toward Polaris and Astrid, finally coalescing into a pointed wall of light, jutting into the wind and pushing it to either side of the wall.
"There. That should help a little."
Polaris whistled quietly. "Been practicing, have you?" A prideful smile crossed Trixie's face. "Try not to look too pleased with yourself, miss."
"My, that's really something," Astrid said, marveling at Trixie's handiwork.
"I'm proud of you, miss. I'm glad to see that you're improving so much. But," his voice becoming suddenly serious, "how come you couldn't do that before? We're freezing our flanks off in this cold."
"To be completely honest," Trixie said sheepishly, "I wasn't sure it would work. I hadn't been able to cast that spell successfully until recently, and I didn't know if it would be able to do it out here."
He laughed. "Well, we're all glad that you did, miss. Now," he continued, "we should probably start making our way through the forest if we want to actually gain any ground."
"Yes, let's do that."
Turning their backs on the previous path, they headed toward the forest. Its ominous presence loomed just at the edge of their field of view. Shadows seemed to be all that were around it. As they began walking toward it, Trixie gazed at the forest's foreboding visage. She was suddenly filled with a sense of dread.
"Well," Trixie thought, "this should be interesting." "Whose idea was it to cut through this forest?" Trixie asked as she fought off what felt like the 100th tree branch. It had been slow going, cutting through the forest, though admittedly it was no slower than their previous pace, and they were making good time. Frustrating and painful time, but good time nonetheless. "I think you were the one who was asking if there was a faster way to Frozen Chasm, miss," Polaris replied, as he helped Astrid shake off a particularly stubborn bush. "I have to admit," he said, "I didn't think it would be this tedious."
"Well," Astrid said as she kicked away the remnants of the bush clinging to her coat, "at least we've been able to stay out of the wind. That has to count for something."
"Suppose so. I would still take the snow and ice over this." He lifted his front hooves up. "Mud. Snow will melt away, but this mud's going to be caked into my fur for weeks, and it's freezing cold, too, as if it weren't bad enough already."
Trixie sat against a rock that jutted out of the ground at a 90-degree angle. As she started picking out the leaves and bark from her coat, she said, "I wasn't expecting it to be so dark here. I know that the trees block out a lot of the sun, but even still, it seems unnaturally dark." "Dear, I think your mind may be playing tricks on you," Astrid said kindly. "I wouldn't worry about it. So far, we haven't come across any signs of life in this forest, so I doubt anything lives here."
"Which is good," added Polaris, "because I don't think I could fight off any more of those timber wolves with all these trees and brushes and whatnot in the way. I'm having a hard time navigating in here."
"What do you mean?" Trixie asked.
"Normally, I navigate by watching the sky, looking for stars and such, but in here, with all the trees blocking my view, it's hard to tell which way is which."
"But you're not lost, right?" Astrid asked worriedly. "You do know which way you're going, right, dear?"
"Of course I know which way I'm going. What kind of guide would I be if I didn't? I said I normally navigate through these stars. I do have other ways of figuring out where I'm going. Amateur navigators use one method. I use multiple."
"I'm sorry to have offended you, oh so great navigator. I didn't realize you were so far above us mortals."
Trixie laughed, and Astrid gave her a wink. "Oh, ha, ha," Polaris chuckled dryly. "Go ahead, laugh it up. You'll be thanking me once we make it out of here."
Yes, yes, we're all very grateful to you," Astrid said, patting him on the back. "You know I was only kidding around."
"Although," Trixie said, "I'm now curious as to what your methods are. Is this some kind of magic?" Polaris grinned slyly. Hugh, of all ponies, should know a magician never reveals his secrets. "But," he added, upon seeing the downcast faces, "I'll make an exception. Just this once. I suppose you wouldn't call what I do magic, at least not in the way you know it, but I like to think it's Earth pony magic."
"Earth pony magic?" asked Trixie. "But Earth ponies don't have magic."
"No, I don't suppose either of them would know anything about it, being unicorns and all. Like I said, it's not really magic, more like intuition."
Trixie cocked an eyebrow.
"See, I can feel which way I'm going in a way. I like to use the stars because they're more accurate, and they're consistent. But if I need to, I can feel the earth beneath my hooves, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, miss, but believe me, it's just as real as your magic."
Astrid's eyebrow rose along with Trixie's.
"It's not like the ground tells me which way's north or anything like that," he said. "Heck, it doesn't really tell me any kind of cardinal direction for that matter. It's more like I feel which way I'm supposed to go. But that isn't always the way I want to go."
"What do you mean like that?"
"I guess life sometimes has different plans for me. It told me once to take the long way to the train station, ended up missing my train, ending up having to wait another day and buy another ticket. That's when I met Astrid. I suppose you'd call it fate. I called it wasting 20 bits.
Astrid giggled. "So that's why you couldn't pay your bill."
Funny thing, fate. One minute you find yourself being chased down the street by a bartender, the next you're meeting the love of your life."
Polaris and Astrid shared a smile and a knowing glance, leaving Trixie feeling decidedly left out.
"What I always wondered," he added, "was what a pretty mare like you was doing in that dump."
Astrid placed a hoof over her lips. "I think I'll save that story for another time," she added.
"All right, you lovebirds," Trixie said, stepping between the two. "Before you get all nostalgic, we really should keep moving. It looks like it's getting even darker, if that's possible."
It was indeed getting darker. The shadows beneath the trees seemed to melt into the pervading darkness, making the ground look almost inky black. The sky overhead, what little was visible through the trees, was a swirling mass of black clouds.
Polaris looked up at the brewing storm. Looks like it's about to get a lot worse here. We should probably find some shelter. If the storm gets bad enough, it'll be too dangerous to continue on through it."
"But—"
Trixie started. Polaris cut her off with a wave of his hoof. "I told you before, miss. The last thing I want to see is either of you hurt. If this storm picks up, the chances of it happening increases by a lot. We can't take that risk, especially since we need to get across the frozen chasm."
"Plus, dear, you'll need to strength up in case anything bad happens," Astrid added. "You never know when you might need your magic. Celestia knows I'm nowhere near as versed as you in magical spells. I hardly use this thing at all," she said, pointing to her horn.
Trixie sighed.
"Fine. It's probably for the best, anyway." "That's a good girl," Astrid said warmly. "We should look for some kind of cave. Maybe a clearing where we can set up."
Polaris nodded. "Shouldn't be too hard to find something like that in here."
"Hey," Trixie said as she looked up at the swirling storm clouds. "Is it just me, or is it getting darker again?"
Harsh whistling winds filled the air as the wind picked up light and crackled around them. Thunder rumbled from the clouds above, and swirling clouds began to get closer and closer to the ground. "That's not a good sign," Polaris said wearily.
Astrid shot him a worried glance. "You don't think it's—"
He nodded gravely. "Yep."
"What?" asked Trixie. "What's happening? What's that sound?"
"Eyes skyward," Polaris said slowly. "Wendigos."